Hey everyone, Scott here from Country Roads Fly Company, coming at you from wild, wonderful West Virginia, USA. In today's video, we're going to talk about some fundamental thread management techniques, specifically twisted thread versus a flat thread, when to use either one of those, and how to go about achieving a flat thread or a twisted thread. So with that, let's dive right into it. All right, I'm going to begin by securing my thread to the hook shank here, but before I go too far, take a look at this thread. See how thin and flat it is? That's how most threads are by default. So I'm going to start taking wraps of this thread towards the hook bend. And you'll notice after a few wraps, my thread's not so flat and thin anymore. It's starting to get twisted. And if you compare it to the tag end here, you can see the difference. So why is that? Well, me as a right-handed tyer, every wrap of thread that I make around the hook shank is putting a clockwise twist in the thread. The more twists or the more wraps I take, the tighter that thread gets twisted. So much so that if you watch the bobbin here, I'm going to release it and see what happens. It starts to uncoil just on its own. So we've got a pretty tightly wrapped, twisted thread base here, which a lot of times is exactly what you want. So if you're tying a pattern that includes some natural hair wings, for example, a wolf pattern that uses deer hair wings, or a comparadon, something like that, you want this twisted thread base to mount those types of winging materials on, because those materials naturally, they tend to, when you tie them in, they tend to wrap and slip and wrap around the far side of the hook. So having a porous thread base like this, which is provided by the twisted thread, that'll help prevent materials like that from slipping and wrapping around your hook. So that's the basics of a twisted thread. I'm going to unwrap this hook and we'll talk about a flat thread. Okay, so we've covered a twisted thread. Let's now talk about a flattened thread. I'm going to go ahead and attach my thread here and start to build up a thread base. And as we've learned while doing this, my thread with every wrap is gaining a twist. Let me cut off the tag end here. So as you can see, and as previously, we've got a pretty twisted thread base here. After just a few wraps, my thread is not so flat anymore. But there are times when you want a flat thread. For example, if you're tying a classic mayfly pattern, such as a Quill Gordon, it calls for a very slim body profile. You need to make the underbody equally slim and tapered. And with a twisted thread, it's hard to control that. It's hard to gain that very thin, tidy underbody that's required of the pattern. So what you do is you want to return the thread to a flattened state. Now, as we saw before, you can simply let the bobbin go. It will unwind itself and return to a flattened state, or you can help it out a little bit by giving it a spin. As you can see, I'm back to a relatively flat thread profile at this point. Maybe go just a bit more. So once you have that, you can take wraps and then every couple turns just try to undo those twists by manually giving the bobbin a twist. And as you can see, this is resulting in a very thin profile, which is what you want for certain patterns or in certain circumstances. You know, another use case for a flattened thread is when you're tying a collar style hackle. So again, on the same Quill Gordon example, which has a collar style hackle, it's really important that the thread base beneath the hackle be tidy, uniform, flat. If you use a twisted thread underneath a hackle, the hackle stem is going to get trapped between the strands of thread, and it's going to cause your hackles to splay in all different directions, which isn't necessarily what you want in a pattern like that. Another use case for a flattened thread is if you need to split your thread. So as an alternative to a dubbing loop, a lot of tyers like to use split thread technique instead. So a flattened thread is much easier to split, as you can imagine. In fact, I can take my bobbin here and demonstrate just how easy it is to split a flattened thread. So if the thread was twisted heavily, it would be very difficult to split like that. So that's it for today. Just a quick video on some basic yet very important thread management techniques. Hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it helps you tie more professional looking flies. And I hope you'll join me for the next edition of Wrap by Wrap. Until then, thanks for watching.